Okay, so we are looking at first introducing the quote. So imagine you're in the A strategy right now, right? The first thing you would do is you would answer the question. So if it asks, like, what is the theme of Gil's Furniture Bought and Sold, I would answer the question. I would restate it. I would say, the theme of Gil's Furniture Bought and Sold by Sandra Cisneros is beauty can be found in unexpected places, period. The rest of your paragraph is going to prove that theme. Okay, one mistake kids do is they start summarizing the story. Don't make that mistake. Assume that your reader has already read the story. So now I'm going to go right in immediately and prove the theme of Gil's Furniture Bought and Sold. And so for this activity, we are focusing on quoting for our evidence, for our cite. So before we can cite our evidence, we're going to go ahead and introduce the quote. How many citations do you need for an ACE strategy? Well, you always need 2 citations. So I'm going to use a transition word to signal that evidence is going to be given. So in your notes, underline my favorites. My favorites, and this is especially for my first piece of evidence, I like to use for instance or for example, or even first, if you could write that into your notes, please. Then, maybe for my second piece of evidence, my favorites are in addition or secondly. Okay? No matter what transition, word, or phrase I use here, you're always going to follow with a comma. Okay? So I might say secondly, comma, and then I'm going to go into my evidence. I would say for what we're doing, we're really not going to use these transitions of consequence. But if I do have like a third piece of evidence, I might use finally. And that's probably my favorite out of all these. But for the ACE strategy, you only need 2 pieces of evidence. So these would be your most common transitions. So I would say, for example, comma, have my evidence, explain, and then go into my second piece of evidence. In addition, comma, have my evidence, explain. Okay, so that's the very first thing I am looking for as a reader to see that you are organized. So that's the very first thing I should see in your sentence is your use of transitions. The next thing you're going to want to do is signal that the quote is coming. Now this does not have to come right after your transition. I could give context first and then later signal the quote is coming. I need you to add this to your notes. When it says X here, since this is a literary analysis, this is usually going to be the narrator, like according to the narrator, or it could be a character's name, like according to Torvald, comma, he thinks that Nora is, and then maybe I could embed my quote. All right, so or the narrator states that, or Torvald stated that, right? So signaling the quote is coming doesn't have to come right after your transition, but it does need to come before you actually embed your quote. So that's something else I'm looking for when you're introducing the quote. Okay? The last thing I'm looking for is context. And this is definitely the most challenging part of embedding a quote. You know, you don't just want to randomly drop your quote into the sentence and we have no idea what you're talking about. Okay? So if you look at this example, imagine if I said, for example, the text states that the old man let go a million moths all over the dusty furniture. And this is about Gil's Furniture Bought and Sold. If I said that, is that really what happened? Did the old man really let go a million moths? Well, no. He was just using a simile to describe how beautiful the music sounded. So I've got to give some context so that the reader understands that. So if I'm writing this, I might say, for example, could you add that in your notes, please? For example, comma. Now I'm going to give some context. The narrator uses figurative language to describe the beautiful sound of the music, comma. Like the old man, quote, let go a million moths all over the dusty furniture. So now what I've done is I've given a little context so the reader can understand how this quote fits into things, like what happened when this quote occurred in the text. So that's what it means to give context. So before your quote, you're going to use a transition word. You're going to give context and signal the quote is coming. And again, these don't have to happen in order. Okay, they don't have to happen in order. So I want to show you an example of this. I think it's really going to help you. This is an example of a student who is answering the question, what is the theme of Pandora's box, right? And I am grading them on transition words, signaling the quote is coming, and giving context. That's the first parts, 1, 2, and 3 of our ICE strategy, right? So let's take a look. The student has answered the question. So as I'm grading, the first thing I want to see is a transition, and he has that. He says, for example. Then he says, according to the text. That is him signaling that the quote is coming, right? He's doing number 2. He said, for example, and he's saying, according to the text. So that's perfect, right? But then look what he does. He jumps right into the quote. They were noisome, abominably colored, and evil looking. Okay, so as a reader, I don't even know what they is, and I have no idea what's happening in the story when this quote occurred. So this is an example of a story that's missing context. So instead, I could say, according to the text, after Pandora opened the box, comma, she released spirits that were noisome, abominably colored, and evil looking. And then I would probably end my quote there because I really don't need everything here. Okay, so now what I have is I have my transition, I signaled the quote is coming, and I've given context so that this quote isn't just thrown in the middle. Okay, let's look at another example. This writer did the same exact thing again here. So he said, for example, which ideally I'd rather see a different transition. I'd rather him not use the same transition twice. So maybe he could say in addition or secondly, and he does it again. He says, according to the text, it will never leave us for long. Listen, what is it? I don't even know what he's talking about. He says, even if we lose sight of it, it will be there. I need to know a little bit more. I need context. So I could say, for example, after Pandora released the evil, she releases hope and says, this is me signaling that the quote is coming, and says that, and then I go into my quote, that it will never leave us for long. Now I know that it is hope. Okay? So this is what it means to give context. This is what I'm looking for. Again, it doesn't have to go in this order, right? I don't have to signal the quote is coming and then give context. I could have said, for example, after Pandora released the evil, she released hope, and Pandora said that, right? Like, I gave context and then I signaled the quote was coming, so I switched it up here. Or I could do the same thing here. I could switch it up and say, for example, after Pandora opened the box, she released, I could say, according to the text, she released spirits that were, quote, noisome, abominably colored, and evil looking. Okay? So this is what I'm looking for. This is what I mean when I say I'm looking for you to introduce a quote using a transition, signaling the quote is coming, and giving context.